My name is Marcus, I'm 31, and for most of my life I was treated like the spare part in my own family, not hated, not abused, just quietly pushed to the side like an extra chair no one had room for. I wasn't rebellious or dramatic, I didn't bring shame or glory, I simply existed in the background where no one had to bother too much. I learned early that in my house love came with conditions, and the currency was performance. Praise came when grades were perfect, smiles came when you mimicked what they wanted, gifts came when you didn't speak your mind, and I was never great at any of that. I have two brothers, Jacob, the oldest, the golden child, always perfect in school, obedient, respectful, church-going, and full of charm, and then there's Eli, the youngest, a mess of energy and wild stories, but funny, likable. He could wreck the car and still make mom laugh in 5 minutes. Me, I was the middle child, not quite exceptional, not quite a disaster, just there. I tried though, I did my best, I got decent grades. Helped around the house, never made trouble, but that was never enough. They didn't notice when I stayed late after school for extra credit. They didn't clap when I got into college on a partial scholarship. I remember once winning a state science fair and my mom telling me to keep it down because Jacob was studying for a law exam and needed quiet. That moment stuck with me because it was the first time I realized that no matter how loud my success was, it would always be a whisper in my family's world. I moved out at 19, got a job, started renting a small apartment on the edge of town. It wasn't much, but it was mine, quiet, peaceful, and I didn't have to fight for a chair at the table anymore. For a while I tried to keep the connection alive, calling every Sunday, visiting on holidays, sending gifts on birthdays, but it was always one-sided. Calls went unanswered, texts left on read. One year, I drove 3 hours for Christmas, only to find out they'd gone on a trip without telling me. They left a fruitcake on the porch with a note saying, "Sorry Marcus, maybe next year." I stood there in the snow staring at the little box and finally understood they weren't going to change. They weren't going to notice me unless I made them. I spent the next few years building my own life, started working in IT, saved every penny, bought a small condo, met people who valued me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. I still sent cards, still showed up, still tried, but my expectations had changed. I no longer begged for their attention, I simply observed, and what I saw broke my heart. My parents helped Jacob buy a house, they paid for Eli's rehab twice, they co-signed car loans, gave down payments, offered endless support, but when I asked for a small loan to cover a medical bill, I was told to be more responsible. I paid it off myself with interest and silence, and that silence started growing. Last year my father turned 65. There was a big party, of course, catered with music, decorations, and a video montage of family moments. I wasn't invited. I found out from Eli's Instagram a picture of the whole family smiling under fairy lights. While I sat at home working a night shift, I stared at that image for a long time, not because I was surprised, but because I finally felt done, not angry, not vengeful, just done. I closed the app, turned off my phone, and made a decision. It was time for things to change, and I knew exactly how to start. I started with something simple. I wrote a letter, not dramatic, not accusatory, just honest. I explained how I'd felt my whole life, how I had tried to be seen, how I had offered love and support with nothing in return, how I was tired of pretending. I sent it to my parents and both brothers, printed on paper with no return address. I didn't expect a reply, and I didn't get one, not directly, but the next week Jacob called. I didn't answer. Then Eli texted me a long paragraph about how family is complicated and how I was being selfish for bringing up old wounds. I left that on read. A few days later my mom showed up at my door. She looked older, more tired than I remembered. She asked if we could talk. I let her, and she walked around my condo quietly, her eyes scanning the photos on the wall, the books, the small reminders that I had a full life now. Then she sat down and said, "I didn't know it was that bad." I stayed standing. "You didn't want to know," I said. She looked down. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just thought you were doing okay. You always seemed fine." That sentence hit me harder than I expected. I always seemed fine because I had to be, because showing pain never earned me anything in that house, because being okay was the only way to survive. I told her that, and she cried real tears, and I watched and waited to feel something, but I didn't. Not anger, not relief, just quiet. After a while she left, and I felt lighter, not because we fixed anything, but because I'd finally said it. The next day I called my lawyer. I wanted to change my will. I had no spouse, no kids, but I did have a few savings and some assets, and I wanted them to go to people who had truly shown up in my life, friends, neighbors, my mentor at work, the woman at the library who once helped me through a panic attack while I was searching for a job. I excluded my family completely. It felt like drawing a line in the sand, a quiet declaration that I was no longer invisible, that I was taking control. Then came the big moment I hadn't Expected. My father got sick 2 months later. It was sudden heart complications. He was in the hospital for 3 weeks, and during that time I got a call from Jacob asking if I'd visit. I said no. Jacob said Dad was asking for me. I said he didn't ask for me for 65 years, and I wasn't going to pretend. Now I stayed home, wrote him a letter, and mailed it to the hospital. Again, no drama, just truth. When he passed, I wasn't mentioned in the obituary. I wasn't invited to the funeral. Again, I found out on social media a photo of the whole family dressed in black, smiles, still perfectly in place, like nothing ever happened, like I had never existed, and that should have hurt, but it didn't. I took the day off work, went for a long walk, made cinnamon pancakes, and called a friend, and for the first time on a day like that I felt peace. A few weeks later, I got another call, this time from Eli. He was angry, said I'd embarrassed the family, said people were asking why I wasn't there, said Mom was crying. I let him rant, then I said calmly, I'm not your scapegoat anymore, and I hung up. No yelling, no breakdowns, just a door quietly closing behind me. That night I got messages from distant cousins, ones I hadn't seen in years. A few said they always wondered why I was left out. A few said they had their own stories. A few simply said thank you for saying something. I started to see the pattern. It wasn't just me. Families like mine, they survive on silence. They thrive when no one questions the roles they've assigned you. They love the peace more than they love the people, and when you disrupt that, they panic. But I didn't care. I had already made peace with who I was and who I wasn't. I wasn't their invisible child anymore. I wasn't the one waiting outside in the cold. I was someone building a new legacy, one that didn't require permission or validation, one rooted in honesty, boundaries, and real connection. My aunt tried to call me again, but I didn't pick up. I knew she was only going to try and convince me to come back to the family, to smooth things over, to make peace for the sake of appearances. But I wasn't interested in peace. I was interested in justice, and for once, I felt like I was getting it, not through revenge, not by being cruel, but by finally standing up and showing that I wouldn't be walked over anymore. I spent the following weeks not hiding, not avoiding confrontation, but living louder. Posting my artwork, sharing my writing, starting my podcast, talking about family dynamics and healing, and people listened. Thousands listened. Strangers messaged me saying they felt seen. Some said it gave them courage to speak up, to leave a toxic situation, or to finally choose themselves. And with every message, I felt lighter, like I'd been carrying a weight for years that wasn't mine to carry. I saw Ava once in January. She came to a bookstore where I was doing a small reading for my writing group. She didn't say a word, just stood in the back, arms folded, then left before it ended. I didn't chase her. I didn't wonder what she thought or hoped she changed. I just kept reading, kept being me. Later that night, I got an email from an old teacher who recognized me in a video someone had posted. She said she always remembered how quiet I was, how thoughtful, how much I noticed, but never said, and how glad she was to see me finally speaking up. It reminded me that I wasn't invisible. I was never invisible, just ignored by people who didn't want to see me. By spring, my life looked completely different. I had new friends, a growing community around my work, invitations to collaborate from people who respected me for me. I started therapy, not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand how to build healthier relationships. I wanted to learn how to set boundaries that didn't feel like guilt trips, and how to love people without losing myself in the process. One day in April, I got a package in the mail. It was from Maya. Inside was a photo album with pictures of us over the years, birthdays, movie nights, road trips. On the first page, she wrote, "For the version of you that was always enough, even when they didn't see it." I cried, not because I was sad, but because for once, someone saw all of me, not just the convenient parts, not the version that smiled through pain, but the real me. And they chose to stay. By May, my mom had started telling people I was sick, that I'd had some kind of breakdown, that none of it was true, and I was just confused and needed help. But people weren't buying it, because the truth had legs now. It had voices, not just mine, but Maya's, Daniel's, Aunt Laura's, people who had seen it firsthand, who had lived it, and were done pretending. By summer, they stopped trying to reach me entirely, and that silence was golden, because in the quiet I heard something I hadn't in years. Peace, not the forced kind where you're told to keep the family together for the sake of elders, but real peace, the kind that comes when you stop begging people to love you and start loving yourself instead. I published my first book in June. It was a collection of stories inspired by real events, mine and others, anonymous, but powerful, about finding your voice, reclaiming your space, and healing from the inside out. It sold well, but more importantly, it resonated. People wrote reviews that said things like, "I didn't know how much I needed this, and I gave this to my sister, and it helped us talk for the first time in years." And I knew then this was my purpose, not to fix the people who broke me, but to help others rebuild after being broken too. In July, I moved into a new place, a small studio with plants in the window and music playing all day. I hosted dinners with people who made me laugh until I cried, who didn't expect me to pretend, who didn't ask me to shrink myself to fit their comfort. And one evening, as we sat around sharing stories and dreams, I looked around and thought, this is family, not the one I was born into, but the one I chose, the one I built. And in that moment, I felt whole. One day in August, I got a letter from a cousin I barely knew. She said she'd seen everything unfold online, had been silent because she was scared, but now wanted to say thank you for being brave, that she'd started therapy because of my story, that she was finally telling her truth. And it hit me again, the ripple effect, how one voice can open doors for others, can give permission to feel, to speak, to heal. And I promised myself that I'd never go quiet again, not for their comfort, not for appearances, not for shame. And if they ever came back, not to apologize, but to rewrite the past. I'd remember this: I don't owe anyone a version of me that makes them feel better about how they treated me. I owe myself the truth, the love, and the freedom to live without fear or performance. I'm not Oliver the forgotten. I'm not the extra puzzle piece or the family disappointment. I'm me, strong, honest, imperfect, loved not by all, but by the right ones. And that's more than enough. This is my story, not a sad one, not a revenge tale, but a victory, a reclaiming, a beginning where I choose the ending. And the ending is this: I stood up, I spoke out, I walked away, and justice, not revenge, not pity, but justice followed behind me like a shadow, steady, unwavering, always with me, reminding me that the truth, the real truth, is never something to be ashamed of. It's the thing that sets you free.